on
I
that?
don't think he's acting on his own accord for sure.
Yeah.
I think this comes from upstairs. And look, John, here's where I'm at. Does that seem short to me? Yeah. Does it seem kind of crazy they're not practicing today? Yeah. But they were the least injured team last year, and you have to take that into account. And I'm willing at least to give them the benefit of the doubt. The part where I'm going to stray from this is if they start the season off and they look like they're a mess and they don't look, tackling sloppy. You may see that around the league, but tackling sloppy, they don't appear to know where they're supposed to be in certain ways. Like, to me, you can offset that a little bit if you're doing more film study, if you're doing more installation stuff in the classroom, I guess. But if it starts off ugly, then you have every right to come down on them. I mean, even by the NFL standards now with these CBAs, the Eagles take this to an extreme.
Appreciate you getting in with us on Birds 365 with your Mac and Mac guys, McDonald and McMullen. There's a familiar face you JAKIB Media YouTube fans should recognize from our very own Sports Take and the host of the Eagles postgame show on their radio network, one Mr. Rob Ellis here on Birds 365. Good to get you up on another show, Mr. Ellis.
I'm loving it. Max squared, man. What better way to start the day? I'm ready to roll, man. Hanging with you.
There we go. We need some of that energy, Rob Ellis. Well, I do. A long day yesterday.
I hear you. It's like the first day of school, right, John? You get back there,
exactly.
You see some familiar faces.
Although the first day of school is like a half day now, Rob.
It's a good point. Well, it kind of is like, you're with the Eagles, you're right. And then you get an off day the next day or a walkthrough. It's nice.
Yeah. Second day of school, I don't remember getting off. But
no, that was a full day. It was hardcore.
Let's start with that. 58 minutes, high intensity. You probably heard Nick Sirianni trying to explain it. You buy that, Rob Ellis, or you think? I know from my perspective, I think Nick Sirianni's a competitive guy. I find it very hard to believe that he wasn't. If he wasn't allowed to practice more, you'd say, yeah, forget it. This is enough. Your thoughts on that?
I don't think he's acting on his own accord for sure.
Yeah.
I think this comes from upstairs. And look, John, here's where I'm at. Does that seem short to me? Yeah. Does it seem kind of crazy they're not practicing today? Yeah. But they were the least injured team last year, and you have to take that into account. And I'm willing at least to give them the benefit of the doubt. The part where I'm going to stray from this is if they start the season off and they look like they're a mess and they don't look, tackling sloppy. You may see that around the league, but tackling sloppy, they don't appear to know where they're supposed to be in certain ways. Like, to me, you can offset that a little bit if you're doing more film study, if you're doing more installation stuff in the classroom, I guess. But if it starts off ugly, then you have every right to come down on them. I mean, even by the NFL standards now with these CBAs, the Eagles take this to an extreme.
Yeah, they do.
There's a lack of work.
Well, to follow up real quick before you jump in, Jody, last year, Rob, they looked great week one, but then 2-5 start, and all of a sudden that was a mirage. So maybe that had more to do with Atlanta not being ready with a rookie head coach. So if they show up in Detroit and just wax the Lions, are you going to feel comfortable and say, all right, they made the right decision, they're healthy, they're comfortable? Or are you going to wait a couple of weeks? Because last year unfolded in a negative fashion from that perspective. All the penalties, remember, too, at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, they were heavily penalized. I think you got to wait about a month, John. I don't think you can gauge it by one, especially against it. And I think Detroit's going to be better. Look, Detroit wasn't. If you watch them last year, I know them just from a betting perspective, they were a great betting team. They were pretty competitive. The Eagles beat the brakes off of Detroit last year. But I mean, I think they're going to be better this year. But you got to give me more than one game. You're right about the penalties, and the one that drove me nuts was the receiver pick plays. Which
that was all year.
I know that was, and to me, Nick Sirianni's a former receiver. Like if you're going to get that right, I don't know how that happened, but I need to see it for about a month, John, before I can say, you know what, this was the right way to go. But again, they were very healthy last year in their defense.
Robbie, I just asked John this, and I know you had to deal with it. Did he keep an actual handwritten record of how many completions Jalen Hurts had and how many passes he threw in the first day of practice?
By the way, I have that, Jody. But I give it a hat tip to Elliott Shore Parks. 12 for 15, according to Elliott.
Hey, that's pretty damn. That's 80%. That's like the Eagles' opposing quarterbacks are going up against them during that first half.
That was Derek Carr-esque, Jody.
Yes, exactly right. Good for Jalen Hurts. The reason why I bring it up, Rob, is because you had to deal with it doing a show with D. Gunn, who decided to report he got on what Jalen Hurts was doing in OTAs. Whether it's overstated or not. Thanks, Elliot, for the numbers. Yeah, I'm going to just put the numbers aside. What are you looking for when you either get the chance or get reports from guys who are actually there? John said he made a great back shoulder throw, which wasn't necessarily his forte last year. Do we have to wait? Like you're waiting a month to find out if the Eagles are handling this right with less practice than maybe anybody else in the National Football League, at least via time? When do you say, all right, here's what I'm looking for from Jalen Hurts. Either he's giving it to me or he's not. How do you determine whether Jalen Hurts has improved enough going forward for this team past 2022?
I'll tell you, Jody, it's all about clock for me with him. In terms of just how quickly is he getting the ball out, if he's going through his reads.
And that was his worst play yesterday, Rob. He threw the ball late.
Yeah.
And Marcus Epps was able to undercut it and intercept it.
That's what concerns me the most, guys. I mean, I think the can't throw the deep ball thing is overblown. I think some of the other stuff gets blown out of proportion with him. But the biggest thing for me is, if the first read isn't there, I don't want him to just tuck it, run to his right like he almost always does. I want him to try to go through progressions. I want him to climb the pocket. What's Brady do better than anybody else maybe that's ever played the game?
Yeah.
It's climb that pocket. Yeah. Peyton Manning. These guys weren't going to, win any kind of 100-yard dash, but they were able to buy themselves enough time. And that's all you need in that league sometimes is second. So that's what it's all about for me. I want to see him be able to hang, not just fall back on his athleticism, which is great, mind you. However, you don't ultimately win deep. You don't go deep in the NFL with that trait. He's got to be able to stay in the pocket and make the throws.
Now, what do you think, Rob, of the team, everybody falling on their sword for Jalen Hurts? Oh, Jalen Hurts. I mean, everybody. You just mentioned Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. Everybody, including those guys. Aaron Rodgers, throw out any name you want, has a bad OTA practice. Who cares? Not a big deal. But this team was falling on their swords. A.J. Brown, the head coach, he's wearing the T-shirt. Everybody, is that a good thing? They want to protect their quarterback. You think it's a little too much insulation? Could work both ways.
Yeah, I don't mind Sirianni wearing the T-shirt. That's kind of who he is. Like, he's kind of a goofball high school football coach, rah-rah. Yeah. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think it connects with the players, and I think he'd wear anybody. I think you could see him wearing Brandon Graham.
Yeah, he already has. Yeah.
So I don't care about that part. I do think the players are almost overprotective, like an older brother is maybe sometimes with the younger brother. And it does concern me a little bit. What's the line? Thou does protest a little too much. It feels like it's a little bit over the top for me, that they're almost very sensitive to it. Like every quarterback goes through that. I mean, yeah. I get A.J. Brown was trying to have his back with Gunner's report, but like you said, who cares? It's one practice. Yeah. Was he off a little bit? Yeah. Gunner wasn't saying he stunk the whole OTAs. He said it was one practice. Like, to me, if you're going overboard with that, come on, man. Like, what are we doing? So I do think it's a little bit much, which worries me because maybe they're seeing some of the things on the downside that isn't necessarily good. And they kind of know a little bit, we got to prop this guy up. I don't think he asks them to do that by any stretch. Let me be clear, because I think he's secure enough in his own person and his own skin. But I think they almost go over the top, which would worry me. Like, I don't think you're getting Randall Cobb is not going over the top to protect Aaron Rodgers if he has a rough OTA. Let's put it that way.
Oh, that's a foregone conclusion. Exactly. Here's the only storyline that I would say goes above and beyond that everybody loves Jalen and Jalen's the greatest leader. And why are you guys picking on Jalen? And you're so mistaken when you critique Jalen. Here's the only one that tops it for me. Jalen is going to be so much better because for the second consecutive year, he's working with the same coaching staff and the same family. Stop. Come on. You're in the NFL. This isn't high school where, continuity. If you're with the same guy, that's going to make it that much easier. Are you with either of you two guys with me on this? All right. The story's been reported. It doesn't need to be harped on. Jalen shouldn't be falling back on, oh, I know this so much better. Just go out and get the job done.
Yeah, I think, Jody, it falls on the intangible thing that we always kind of fall back on too, right? That plays into it as well. I mean, do you love the fact that he's not Kyler Murray and you don't have to put clauses in his contract to study? Yeah, that's great, right? I mean, I love that. And by the way, that has
that's unreal
all over it.
That
I have a real bad feeling about
Yeah.
Arizona. That's just me. But nonetheless, I'm with you. Like, ultimately, all this stuff is great. But it's, to an extent, it's kind of window washing a little bit. You got to be able to make the plays on the field. Like, I'm a great guy, but if I'm lining up against Detroit week 1, September 11th, the Eagles are toast. Okay. So he's got to be able to make the throws. To me, it's the mid-range game where he struggles more than anything else. It's the middle of the field. It's those touch passes.
Yeah.
That's what he's got to get better at. I don't worry about, like, I think AJ Brown's going to help him a lot because you can hit him 5 out and he's going to make a big play for you after the catch. And that's huge. And I think he can connect with Devontae Smith late, deep, but it's the middle stuff more than anything else. But Jody, I hear you. I mean, look, we all do it and we all discuss it. And we all know what a good guy he is. It's almost like, how much more can we say it at this point?
Yeah. I do think it helps a little bit to be more comfortable in the offense, be more comfortable with the play caller. I think there's a natural evolution there, but I certainly agree with Jody that it's a little bit overblown. What isn't going to be overblown in day one, Rob Ellis, I'm already patting myself on the back because I made this prediction that Jalen Reagor is going to look great in training camp. And he looked great on day 1 of training camp for this reason. He's a first round talent. There's not 70,000 people there getting all over him. And he's playing against second and third team corners. And he dominated them. Are the Eagles going to create a problem for themselves if they keep going about it this way? Because he's going to play well against lesser cornerbacks. And then we're going to go down this route of fool's gold and saying, well, maybe it's a Nelson Aguilar. Light comes on a little bit in the third season type thing. Should we leave the door open? Should we be Motel 6? Should we leave the light on and say, maybe for Jalen Reagor?
I think it's a good thing, John. I think if anything, he's not being enabled anymore that, hey, you were taken in the first round and we're going to force feed reps to you. Now it's kind of like, if there's any kind of competitive spirit with the guy, you're with the twos now, man. 2 years ago, you were the first round pick. You were the belle of the ball. And now, you're fighting for a roster spot. So if he's got that juice, that fire now, and I read your stuff on JAKIBsports.com and what everybody else is saying, he looked good yesterday. I think it's a good thing because you need depth. And this team, one of the strengths I think of this team in general is depth, offensive line, defensive line. And now if you can have him as a 5th receiver, potentially with the ability that he has, I don't think there's anything bad about it. I think it's a good thing. Now, will the fans maybe start hyping him up a little bit? I don't know. The fans are so angry at him to begin with. I think it's going to take a lot to get them to come back around on him. But I think it's a good thing. And I hope he's grown up enough to realize, look, man, this is kind of do or die for you, at least with this team and maybe in your NFL career. So I think it's a good thing.
John, I know they worked red zone yesterday, big time. Any special teams? Because that's going to factor in on the whole regular decision.
A little bit at the end. He was the first team punt returner. So, I mean, all the guys rotating. He was first. Greg Ward was second. Britton Kobe was third. Then they had a couple other guys, Lance Lenore, who they just signed. But, yeah, he's number 1. He's number 1 punt returner. So if they don't trade him, he's going to be here.
He's going to be the punt guy. I think that's a big part of it. He can look great against, as you correctly point out, second and third team defensive backs, but he may actually have to make a play against another team in a big spot on a punt and help the Eagles either win or lose a game. So that, to me, is as important as he looks in any of these plays.
And for Rob, by the way, this is for you, Rob. Greg Ward and Jalen Reagor ran a successful rub route.
Oh, my God.
No flags.
No flags? I know there were officials there, too, yesterday. Wow. Yeah. See that year, too, John. Things have changed, man. We're not going there. But I'll tell you, an underrated storyline, guys, if you take Jake Elliott out of it, who had a phenomenal year, I'm worried about special teams. I don't like Sippos. I don't like the
No.
return game. I mean, I hope Britton Covey at 5'8", $160, whatever he is, or
Yeah.
Devin Allen, you could somehow emerge. It would be a great thing. But if Reagor is my primary punt returner, I just have visions of the Tampa Bay game, man, where he doesn't secure the ball. At least I know with Greg Ward, he may not do much, but he's catching it likely. So that's an area I don't think we talk about enough. It's a little concerning.
Oh, yeah. It was bad last year. Special teams was bad last year. And you mentioned the return game. The coverage was bad.
Yep.
So they need gunners. They need more consistent, not D-gun, but gunners on punt coverage.
Yeah.
They need better kickoff coverage. They need better return games. They need a better punt game. Everything basically except Jake Elliott. And I think Michael Clay is sort of, everybody's looking at him like this has got to be better.
Yeah, young dude too. He's not even 30 yet, John.
Oh,
right?
I think he might be one of their best special teams players. Unfortunately, he's coaching.
He's coaching.
We haven't seen a player coaching probably since the 50s in the NFL. Maybe we could make that happen again.
All right, Robbie, need your take on this because I know John's, and John slants a specific way because of his affection or his just belief that the player is that talented. That'd be the Eagles' first-round draft pick in the middle of their defensive line.
Yeah,
Jonathan Gannon this year. We're going to see changes to his defense. It's not going to be the same defense we saw last year. Some Eagle fans would like to see drastic changes, even so drastic that Jonathan Gannon is the guy making those calls. But he is. He's here. He may have gotten a couple interviews. He didn't get a head coaching job, despite the fact that the general manager said they're just renting him. Well, they've already paid up this year's rent, so he's here. Get used to it. How are we going to see those differences in Gannon's defense? Is it all going to be determined by Jordan Davis? And all right, we put him in the middle and then we figure out everything else around him. Or does he just fit that role and Gannon's got everything else? Is Zahn Reddick actually the key piece to the defense being different? How are we going to see differences in Gannon's defense?
Joe, I think it's a collective thing. I mean, yeah, Jordan Davis certainly is going to play a big part in this, or he's going to play a part in this thing for sure. But getting a double-digit sack guy in Reddick is enormous. Getting Brandon Graham back, not having to count necessarily as much on Josh Sweat and Derek Barnett, I think is big. You actually have real linebackers, a complete linebacker core for the first time in a long time. Look, Howie is added all over the place on this defense. It wasn't one or two moves. I compare it in this sense. I think you had the kind of depth along the defensive line you had in 2017, which means you could continue to throw fastballs at them and keep these guys fresh along the defensive line. And I think it's huge. Jody, I'm a big believer by the end of the season, the script's going to be flipped on Jonathan Gannon. People are going to be praising him, happy with him. I think he's going to be a candidate for a head coach, which is a good problem to have ultimately. But I think he was, in a lot of ways, hamstrung in a big way last year with a lack of talent. And we sort of want to use that excuse sometimes for Jalen Hurts, or we want to use it for Sirianni maybe. But Gannon doesn't get the same benefit of the doubt because we're so inclined in this city to think like Buddy Ryan, Bud Carson, and Jim Johnson. And it's got to be uber aggressive. And if we don't, if it's not that way, people think about the way people view Jim Schwartz. They're not big fans of his, right?
No.
But so I think we're going to be really happy, but I think it's a collective, not just Jordan Davis.
Well, who do you think you mentioned, Rob, Jordan Davis, and I'll even throw Brandon Graham in there, but Hassan Reddick, because Brandon wasn't here last year. So of all these, James Bradbury, of all these new names, even if you want to go Kaiser White, Nakobe Dean, throw in Jaquaski Tart, all these new names, who's the biggest part of it? Who's the biggest key that needs to have a big season if the Eagles defense is going to take that step forward?
John, I'd say Reddick for a couple of reasons. One, it's a little bit of a challenge to make sure you utilize him right. If you look at the beginning of his career in Arizona, he didn't do much, and it looked like he was going to be a bust. And then they kind of figured it out at the end, and it carried over into last year with Matt Rule and his crew in Carolina. But you got to use him right. If you do use him right, he's a disruptive force, and that changes everything. I mean, that helps the back end. That helps your defensive line. That helps your offense because it can create a turnover and give you a short field. It felt like they didn't have a whole lot of that last year. So I would say
part
Reddick,
of special teams as well.
Yeah,
you can't flip the field. You can't get field position.
Yeah, great. It felt like everything was 75-yard drives and real deliberate kind of stuff. Not necessarily the way they wanted to go. Plus, they ran the ball a lot, which meant there wasn't as many big plays. But I think it's Reddick more than anybody else. If I had to look at somebody else on that defense, I'm curious as to what Bradbury is. Is he the guy we saw in Carolina, or was he just a byproduct of a mess in New York last year? I'm not really sure. I think I also have some PTSD from some of the other corners who have come over here in years past and didn't live up to the hype.
That's fair.
So I have a little bit of that bias going in. So I would say those two guys I would put on the forefront. But let's face it, guys, this goes for offense and defense. I can't wait to see what Nakobe Dean is at the NFL level, because he was so good at the college level. So he's the guy I'm probably most excited to see.
I just got a text from Kerry Williams who said, Is Rob Ellis referring to me that he's got PTSD from? I'm not going to return that.
The answer is yes, Carrie, but don't give him my address, Jody. Don't tell him where I live.
I won't be giving you your number or your address.
Thank you.
Unless you need some sconce advice.
Sconces. Yeah, I think I have to take the day off today later on Sports Take to look at some sconces, but don't tell the guys.
The Eagles can probably get out and get the sconces since they've only got to walk through.
Good point.
Flip side, the question you just asked with John, the new guys on the defense who are going to be there. How about the old guys? How about the guys who might not be grasping that attention because they were here, they were already part of it? Maybe they're benefiting just like Jalen Hurts. 2 consecutive years in a row dealing with the same coach. Why don't we talk about anybody else getting that same benefit that Jalen Hurts gets?
We mentioned it with Fletcher Cox. I just wrote about Fletcher. He was talking about it. Second year in the defense, and he's a better guy.
Since John's already mentioned Fletcher, who's the guy who's flying under the radar? The returning defensive guy who did his job in the system last year and's got a chance to do it even better this year because of the additions the Eagles have made.
Do we get a full season out of Javon Hargrave? He was a world beater early, right? And things really slowed down. But do we get 17 games out of him? And I think he could maybe be a guy who benefits from that rotation I was talking about. And he's also a guy who played in a lot of odd man fronts in Pittsburgh, right? So I think that this could aid him big time, Jody. And he's also in the same position Fletcher's in, where, let's face it, he's pretty much playing for a contract and for his NFL future. So I think Hargrave's kind of flying under, because we're looking at Jordan Davis, right? We're wondering, oh man, should they have brought Fletcher Cox back for $14 million? BG, all these other guys were kind of Hassan Reddick. We're looking at all these other guys. And he's a really good football player, man, that is kind of flying under the radar a little bit, but I think could be huge for this team.
It's interesting because we've gone down this route. So I do want to focus in a little bit. You mentioned Javon. I agree with you. But Fletch, from this perspective, and both you guys, because both you guys get to take calls and talk to the fans more than me. So I want your perspective. It seems to me everybody that they don't want Fletch. They want to see Milton Williams. They want to see Javon. They want to see Jordan Davis. And as Jody says, Rob, I think Jordan Davis is going to be a great player, but hasn't done anything yet. Milton Williams showed some nice signs. He's not Fletcher Cox, even remotely. Javon Hargrave, he made his first Pro Bowl. He had 7.5 sacks, but as you mentioned, it was heavily tilted towards the start of the season, kind of tapered off, pretty much Aaron Cepas like late. But Fletcher's one of the best defensive players in this franchise's history. Why the disconnect of people saying we got to turn the page on Fletcher Cox? It shocks me. And the Eagles don't believe it because they gave him $14 million. Now, they wanted to reboot the contract and they got that done. But $14 million is $14 million. They think he can play. Why does the fan base think Fletcher Cox can't play?
Is some of it, John, the position he plays? I don't think defensive tackles get enough love in general because sometimes it's not a numbers position. Maybe some of that has to do with it. I think there's a lot of pushback that he came back for $14 million. Had it been a little bit cheaper, I don't know. I mean, maybe some of it is that he pushed back a little bit last year on some of the things he was being asked to do, and maybe the fans didn't like that. It's weird because the fans aren't big fans of Jonathan Gannon either, but they seem to be siding with Gannon when it comes to Fletcher Cox. I don't know. It's a good question. I think I think people view him as a guy on the downside, but his downside is probably better than most guys who are on the up, I guess. Yeah, I think he gets a bit of a bad rap. He's probably not appreciated to the level he should have been, because you're talking about he's around his 10th year, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
A pretty good body of consistency here, and a guy who played on a Super Bowl team. So he probably should get a little bit more love than he does. I don't quite get it. I think maybe the price tag has something to do with it. If he came back at like 10 or 9 as opposed to 14, I don't blame him for grabbing as much as he could grab, but I think maybe that has something to do with it.
Rob, I'm sure you guys have talked about this on Sports Take, and you have on your WIP shows, but we haven't gotten your take here on Birds 365. The fact that Nick Sirianni will not be calling plays this year, unbeknownst at least to me, and I think almost everybody else, he wasn't calling them for the second half of last year either, and that became common knowledge. A little bit of a surprise there. But he's turned the responsibility over to his offensive coordinator. John and I both John maybe more so than me, like CEO coaches, guys who don't feel one side of the ball has to be a bigger responsibility for them than the other. But he is just a second-year coach. You don't see guys do it as quickly as Sirianni has done it. Will the Eagles benefit from that this year? Will they be better if you believe that they were better in the second half? And a big reason was Sirianni gave up the play calling responsibilities. I wish I knew exactly how much credit Shane Steichen should get for last year. Going into this year, are the Eagles better because of it?
I actually like the fact that he was secure enough, especially in his first year, to turn it over. My guess is he just wanted to be able to. He was so hyper focused on calling plays that he couldn't, worry about the defense or the special teams or all the stuff that you have to worry about as a head coach. So I can live with that, Jody. I'm good with the decision to turn it over. You obviously have some trust in Steichen. The one thing I'll say about Steichen is, and this is not a knock, I'm almost in the I don't know category with him as far as this year goes. Let me wait and see. But he did almost what he had to do last year. It was pretty obvious that if you wanted to throw the ball 30, 40 times, it wasn't going to work. So they kind of did the obvious. However, sometimes it takes teams a long time to get there, and the Eagles did it, and they did it well. But I'm good with Sirianni being willing to make that kind of move. I think it shows a little something about him as a guy. Look, you have to be confident as a coach, but an ego can be a downfall of a coach too, and you get stubborn to a fault. And this shows me that he's not that guy. As far as Steichen goes, yeah, I didn't know either. When that came out, I'm like, man, was I just asleep at the wheel here? How did we not know that? Right? It's almost one of those things like you're like, do I admit this publicly? I didn't know, but I didn't know.
No,
but
a lot of people
knew.
Well, it was we knew late in the season.
Yeah,
we didn't know. It happened in the Chargers game, and he admitted late in the season that there was a shift. But we never knew when it came to be or when it started. And even now, Nick will say, I think it was the Chargers game, but I'm not sure. But so he tries to play it down, and everything's going to be run the same way. But and that'll be the final one for me. Everybody follow Rob at our Ellis Sports. You see it right there. Sports Take with the gun. Is Barrett going to be back? Where's Barrett?
Barrett's back. Yeah. So we found him. He was, we didn't know where he was. We tracked him down, and he was back in the helm yesterday. So at least for the rest of the week, he's here. Barrett's a rascal, man. You never know what's going on. So actually, I think he's going to be at practice on Friday. So
Friday. Good. So I'll see Barrett. I'll see Barrett there.
Yeah, you will see. You will see. Barrett's not easy to.
Wait a minute. Barrett's not easy to see. How the hell do you say that? Barrett is huge. How do you? If you miss Barrett,
he's trimmed down, man.
You got to eat some carrots, buddy. Your vision's going if you can't see Barrett. Jesus.
He's a lean, mean fighting machine, Jody. How dare you? No, but he's. I meant to say. Okay, he is Barrett's the guy.
He's a big guy, great guy as well.
He's
so
the best.
I will be looking forward to seeing Barrett. But to get back to the Sirianni point, now we all lived through Doug Peterson, and I joked. I was in Minneapolis, and I joked, all right, he's got a lifetime dispensation card when they won, and that lasted 3 years, which is still astonishing to me. But the point is that things can change very quickly. And, Jeffrey Lurie tends to look for scapegoats if expectations are not met. And we saw that in Doug's era with Mike Rowe and Carson Walsh and people like that. Is there any way this giving up the play calling, which I applaud, by the way, personally, comes back to bite him in the you-know-what if things go in a negative direction and Jeffrey Lurie starts saying, well, we brought you in here to be the offensive guy, to be the innovative young coach, to be the play caller. Any negative aspect to it from that perspective?
I would assume he ran that up the flagpole, John. So I don't think he was doing it independently. So they signed off on it. I would guess would be the first thing I would say. Or you could even look at it the other way, right? Or is Steichen scapegoated if it doesn't look well and that protects Nick?
Yeah.
No, I don't think ultimately it falls that way. I'm with you. I was surprised how quickly it happened with Doug. I think Wentz had a lot to do with it in a lot of ways. But no, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think Jeffrey Lurie also wants to be this guy where he's having constant turnover, right? I mean, Chip was a very short tenure. Yeah. Doug was, for a guy who won a Super Bowl, was crazy short. I don't think they want to, the Sirianni thing to be over 2 or 3 years and they become known as this team that's just almost like an NHL team where you're just recycling coaches nonstop. So I don't think that hurts him. I really don't. I think if anything, it insulates him maybe even more as the head coach.
They already have a team like that in the division. They're called the New York Giants. Turn their coach over every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, that's true. Although I think Dable, they got that right with that hire. Eventually, it's not going to happen right away, but I think eventually they're going to be a lot better.
Probably better than the predecessors.
Could be much worse.
At least that much. Yes. Last thing for me, Rob. Howie Roseman spoke yesterday as well, and John told us that he specifically pointed out we need guys like Kayvon Wallace to step up this year. They got to. He put a couple of his own players on notice, deserved players, as a matter of fact. So good on Howie. Mm-hmm. We've given him a lot of credit for having a tremendous offseason in both the draft and in free agency. And mean it when I say it. I'll just speak for myself. I mean it when I say it. I think Howie's had a hell of an offseason. Mm-hmm. But how he likes to tinker, how he likes to be involved, how he likes to have his stamp on the team. If he's already stamped it well enough, what the hell is he going to do all this preseason? Should we worry about? But Howie's going to want to change something because he always does. Can Howie be a understated or at least underactive GM before the year starts?
No. You never discount Howie making a move. I think, Jody, if he can figure something out at safety or to help the special teams or return game, he'll do it. I would say this, if I had to bet money that he sits pat or he does at least something before the regular season starts, I'm betting on something all day because that's just his nature. And you know what? I'd rather it be that way, Jody. I'd rather my executive or my GM err on the side of aggression than some guy who's always standing pat. No, let's see. We'll see what happens. He's always kind of going for it, whether it works all the time or not. I'd much prefer it that way than some of the other GMs we've seen in this town.
Rob Ellis, you'll catch him today with Barrett Brooks. Now, you sure Barrett Brooks? If he pops up, I'm going to know who it is because Barrett is a big guy. You sure he's going to be with you?
Jody, if he's not there, I'm going to his house. Okay, we're going to make this happen today. I am stone cold locking this thing in that Barrett will be there today.
By the way, Rob, I just noticed over your shoulder. I never noticed before. Yeah. You got the bird Irving with Julius Strang.
Oh, yeah, yep.
I love that. I love that.
It's one of my all-time favorites. I got Bednarik over Gifford, Doc and Bird strangling each other, and Reggie White looking over my shoulder. If I get out of line, he sacks me, guys. If I get a little crazy sometimes. So I try to give you a little Reggie, representing my Temple squad, but I got a little Phillies and we try to mix it up in the my studio is like a refrigerator, guys. Like I literally have a blanket around my waist. It is like if there's like icicles coming out of my nose. It's so cold down here. So.
See, John and I are lucky. We're always at the beach with the
see that even in December, you guys are at the beach and it's beautiful in Atlantic City. I love it.
Working well for us. You work well for us today, Mr. Ellis. Thank you very much. Everybody should be tuned in later today for Sports Take when Barrett Brooks sits on Rob Ellis. Should be entertaining. Rob, thanks, bud.
Thank you, fellas. Great being with you.
Thanks.